Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into one of the most unwanted roles in medieval Europe, the executioner. And that's saying a lot in an era when careers like rat catcher and full-time plague survivor were actually a thing, from wielding the sword of justice to becoming a social pariah, cursed and feared. The life of a medieval executioner was a strange, brutal paradox. They were essential, but never welcomed. So, before you get too comfortable, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe, only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I always find it fascinating to see the global reach of this channel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine this. You've just been born. Congratulations. You're the newest addition to a family of executioners, while other babies are snugly wrapped in linen and destined to become bakers, butchers, or if they're lucky, monks. You're gently laid in a cradle, next to a whetstone and a hefty axe. Forget rattles. You're already holding your future in your tiny hands. In the medieval world, execution wasn't a job you applied for. There were no job fairs or LinkedIn profiles. It was inherited like a curse you couldn't escape. If your father was the executioner, you were next in line. Simple as that. Career changes? Not a chance. You weren't destined to be a traveling bard or a shoemaker with a side hustle. Your path was set, and it ended at the chopping block from the moment you could walk. Villagers eyed you with suspicion. Other kids would flee when you walked past, while adults would whisper and lower their voices as if your tiny hands were already drenched in symbolic blood. Don't worry, it's just symbolic for now. Your family dinners? Not the typical, "How was your day?" Instead, they revolved around discussions like, "How many strikes does it take to get a clean chop?" You had no escape from it. Your toys? Miniature gallows. Your bedtime stories? Forget fairy tales. You were more likely to hear about drawing and quartering than happily ever after. And it wasn't just the job, it was the reputation. You could be the kindest, most literate, and well-spoken child in the kingdom, and people would still treat you like you snuck into homes at night to make threats to chickens. In some towns, entire families of executioners were labeled, tracked, and sometimes banned from places like churches, bakeries, or public baths. Hygiene and salvation were clearly not for you, but there were perks. You'd probably never get bullied too badly. No one dared mess with the executioner's kid. Fear had its place, and it gave you a certain level of respect, like thunder or a blade with a razor-sharp edge. Welcome to the life you didn't ask for, but it's yours now. Forever. You've just been born. Hooray! A new bundle of joy wrapped in wool and baptized in holy water, only to be immediately cursed with a family legacy of generational trauma. Your birthright? Execution. While other children are destined to churn butter or inherit a farm, your future is already mapped out in steel. No job application needed. You're the newest member of the family destined to make everyone avoid you like the plague. Literally, executioner is not a career you pick. It picks you. Your father swings the axe, and so will you. No questions asked. Your future involves sharp metal, public executions, and the unsettling reality of being the guy no one makes eye contact with, even when you're 6 years old. As a child, you're already treated like an outcast. Villagers avoid you, whispering behind their hands, as if you've already committed some gruesome act with your toddler-sized hands. Your toys aren't dolls, they're miniature gallows. Your bedtime stories, you're more likely to hear about dismemberment than happily ever after. And no, you can't just marry out of this life. Most respectable families will keep their daughters away from you, let alone walk you down the aisle. But there's an upside. You'll never be bullied. Even the local tough guy knows better than to mess with the executioner's kid. That respect, though unspoken, keeps others at bay. You develop a strong back, steady hands, and a deadly gaze that helps you avoid most social engagements, though it's probably just as well, because you're rarely invited anywhere anyway. So here it is. You didn't ask for the axe life, but the axe life has claimed you, and it won't let go. By the time you're old enough to swing a training axe, you've accepted one truth. The town needs you, but they prefer to keep you in the shadows, hidden behind curtains or mountains of plausible deniability. You are society's contradiction, the one who does the dirty work no one else dares to do. And for that, you get silence, suspicion, and the occasional terrified blessing from a safe distance. You're the solution to problems no one wants on their conscience. But the moment the axe falls, everyone quickly forgets you and pretends to have somewhere else to be. To the people, you are both the executioner and the thing they hope to never see. And yes, it's not just peasants who shun you. Even nobles avoid you. They'll pay you in silver and pat themselves on the back for upholding justice. But you'll never be invited to their feasts. Unless, of course, it's to demonstrate the proper axe form between courses. If something goes wrong, a botched execution or a squeamish crowd, it's your head on the chopping block. The same crowd that cheered you on will turn on you in an instant, faster than a chicken running from the butcher. You're not a person, you're a tool, and the moment you're no longer needed, you're forgotten. Yes, the town needs you, but they'd prefer you stay out of sight. You arrive through the back door, wear a hood, and leave before sunrise. Other boys are learning to plow fields, shoe horses, and, if they're lucky, read. You, on the other hand, are learning the fine art of severing spines in one clean stroke. Welcome to your apprenticeship, where mistakes aren't just costly, they're deadly. Your father, or some weathered old executioner with arms like oak trees, teaches you the sacred art of performing in front of a crowd, because while they may claim to despise what you do, they'll still judge every swing, footstep, and follow-through like they're watching the medieval Olympics. The curriculum? It's a mix of anatomy, precision, and stage presence. After all, every execution is a performance, with you as the headliner. Think of it as dinner theater, except instead of dessert, there's dismemberment. No one teaches you how to cope with the weight of your work. There's no medieval HR department, no mental health leave, no how to stop thinking about decapitations course. You just sharpen your axe, swallow your guilt, and prepare for the next performance. And what do you get in return? Not admiration, not gratitude, just silence, a few extra coins, and the lingering stench of death on your clothes. You're not just trained to kill, you're trained to carry the weight of it in silence. Picture this. It's a sunny morning. The marketplace is bustling. Bakers are hawking bread. Blacksmiths are hammering away. And the butcher is cheerfully waving his cleaver. The world is moving on until you arrive. The crowd parts like you're carrying the plague in one hand and a severed head in the other. And you're not even holding a severed head. Just being there is enough to send people running. You see, executioners were often banned from public markets, or at best relegated to special executioner-only areas where vendors would leave goods out for them to collect like some medieval DoorDash service. Why? Because apparently, the man who handles executions is somehow too unclean to touch a loaf of bread. So, there you are, an outcast in your own town, banned from public spaces, treated like a pariah in your own land. Your handshake is toxic. Your grocery runs require a diplomat, and the only comfort you find is in the solitude of your family. Occupation is known. Your romantic prospects drop faster than a heretic through a trapdoor. No one wants to marry someone whose job description includes cleanup after the bloodbath. Welcome to life as an executioner, where loneliness is just part of the job. Respectable families bolt their doors when you pass by. Fathers pull their daughters in close. Even the town drunk, who once tried to marry a goat, looks at you and mutters, "Bit much, don't you think?" So your dating prospects, well, let's say they're as shallow as a puddle after a drought. The only people who will even consider marrying you are fellow outcasts, gravediggers, lepers, or if you're lucky, widows, whose standards have taken a severe hit. Candlelit dinners? Try whispered conversations in dark alleys to keep the prying eyes at bay. And if by some miracle you do manage to marry and have children, they inherit your profession like an unwelcome inheritance. Sons are trained from youth to handle steel like a surgeon handles a scalpel. Daughters? Well, they bear the name, and that's enough to guarantee social exile by the age of 6. It's less of a family and more of a legally mandated support group. Your family can't attend festivals. They can't walk through town with you. They can't pretend to be normal for even a single Sunday. If they do go to church, they sit in the back or simply don't show up. Salvation has its limits. After all, over time, the isolation wears down even the most devoted. You love your children, of course, but you also pass down a future that smells of blood and solitude. The family tree doesn't grow. It loops. Same job, same shame, same invisible barricade separating you from the rest of the world. There are no grand portraits, no shining crests, just a lineage of people who wore hoods, not to hide their faces, but because the world never wanted to see them in the first place. You've spent the week doing your job, literally, lopping off heads, disemboweling heretics, and maybe even wiping your blade with holy water out of sheer nerves. So, surely, it's time to confess your sins, right? Light a candle, say a prayer, start over. Well, not so fast. In the eyes of the medieval church, you're an odd creature, teetering between necessary evil and walking contradiction. You enforce divine justice, yes. You serve the state, upholding law and order. But here's the kicker. You kill people for a living. And that's inconveniently a sin. Despite carrying out God's work, you're not exactly welcomed with open arms in his house. Many executioners found themselves flat out denied confession. Some priests wouldn't even listen to you. Others insisted you undergo a cleansing ritual before stepping foot in the church, which is a tricky request, since no amount of soap can scrub away your reputation. And don't even think about taking communion. That was reserved for clean souls, and yours was stained beyond redemption. It's a bitter twist of fate. You kill with state approval, but spiritually, you're treated like a man who enjoys strangling. Kittens, even lepers, those with actual medical excuses, were often treated with more compassion than you. Weddings? Not in the church. Christenings? Maybe, if the priest is feeling extra charitable and half the town isn't glaring at him. Funerals? Not a chance. Some executioners weren't even buried in consecrated ground. Instead, they got a lonely ditch outside the cemetery walls. Prime real estate for exiles, suicides, and those who forgot to tithe. So where does that leave you? Spiritually, nowhere comforting. You spend your life immersed in death, yet there's no way to purge your own sins. You can't unburden yourself. You can't cry to a friar or light a candle for your misdeeds. Instead, you carry them quietly and heavily. Sometimes you drink. Sometimes you scream into the forest. Sometimes you just sharpen your blade once more, even when you believe you're doing the right thing. When the trial is fair and the law is clear, you go home unsure whether you're damned by man, by God, or both. Because in a world full of sinners, you're the one who made a career out of it. There's nothing quite like the pressure of executing in front of a roaring crowd. It's part justice, part ritual, part public spectacle, and you're the star of the show. Forget your nerves. Forget the bad weather. The crowd doesn't care if your wrist aches, if your stomach's empty, or if the axe is a little dull from last week's double hanging. They came for a show. And you're the one holding the spotlight and the blade. The goal? Simple. One clean swing. A swift, clean beheading is the gold standard. Anything less, and the murmurs start. Miss by an inch, and the crowd gasps. Take a second swing, and they groan. A third swing? Now they're booing. Some will laugh. One kid will cry. Someone will throw an onion. Let's be honest. You feel it too. The shame, the failure, the victim twitching on the block, the blood spurting wrong, your boots sticky with regret. You weren't trained for this part. The psychological fallout that comes with turning someone's final moments into a public disgrace. Sometimes the axe gets stuck in bone. Sometimes the condemned jerks at the last second. Sometimes your hand just slips. And in those moments, your entire reputation and possibly your job hangs in the balance. Here's the thing. No one cares how hard the job is. They just want it to look easy. Executioners are supposed to be clinical, unemotional, precise. If you falter, you risk looking weak. And in a world obsessed with strength, weakness is contagious. The rumors spread fast. He needed 2 swings. His hand was shaking. The guy suffered. You become a cautionary tale, whispered about in breadlines. Don't end up like that poor guy. Or worse, like the one who couldn't even finish the job. So you go home, scrub your blade, and replay every mistake, every gasp, every groan. You keep playing it back until your mind is too tired to keep spinning. But even then, it lingers. Because in your world, the axe doesn't just fall on the condemned. It hovers over you too. Every time you step onto that platform, you know the crowd is judging you too. So, the deed is done. The crowd has gasped, gawked, and scattered. The condemned is headless. Justice has been served. The village square returns to selling cabbage. Time to pack up and head home, right? Not so fast. Being an executioner isn't just about swinging an axe. That's the dramatic part, the flashy moment. The rest, much messier, much quieter, and far more grotesquely underappreciated. Because someone has to deal with the body, and, surprise, it's you. You might be asked to burn the body, bury it in unconsecrated ground, or stuff it into a shallow grave under the gallows. Basically, a medieval garbage chute. No funeral, no ceremony, just the faint hope that the local dogs won't dig it up. And of course, you don't get gloves, soap, or a break. You are, effectively, the sanitation department of death, the final cleaner of sin, the silent janitor of justice. And no one thanks you. In fact, the same people who cheered the execution now avoid you even harder because you smell like ash and entrails. And then there are the side jobs. Torture? That's your responsibility. Branding criminals? Yep. You again. Public shaming setups? You're the one with the hammer and nails. Sometimes, they'll even have you flog someone while reading scripture aloud, multitasking your way through a moral meltdown. And if a noble demands discretion, guess who's cleaning up their mess with zero witnesses and a very real understanding that if anyone talks, they're next. Executioner by title? Sure. But by function, you're medieval society's all-purpose horror technician. When the crowds disappear, the priests go silent, and the court scribes head back to their scrolls. You stay behind. You finish the job no one else can stomach. For all the fear, revulsion, and existential dread tied to your role, being an executioner does come with one undeniable perk. You get paid. In fact, you're often paid more than the average peasant. Executions, torture sessions, dismemberment duties, they all come with a generous purse of silver. Add in bribes for extra discretion or for making it quick, and you might find yourself with the kind of money that makes bakers envious. But here's the catch. You can't spend it like a normal person. You walk into a tavern with a jingling pouch, and suddenly the room grows silent. The barkeep pours your ale, then wipes the counter like your presence is a stain. You tip him double, and he still won't look you in the eye. You go to buy a new tunic, and the tailor hands it over with tongs. The coins you give him are real, but to him, they're cursed. Blood money, he mutters, as if the silver will bite him, and heaven help you if you try to give charity. One time, you tried donating to the church. They took your donation, but then used it to pay someone else to clean the holy relics, just to be safe. Sure, you can accumulate wealth. You might even build a small home with actual furniture, rare for your class. But the irony? The more you earn, the more isolated you become. You're rich, yes, but you're rich like a dragon hoarding gold in a cave, alone and feared. People assume that money makes up for the stigma, that a heavy purse balances a heavy conscience. But gold doesn't silence nightmares. It doesn't scrub blood from your memory. It doesn't buy back your humanity. It just sits there, cold, shiny, useless for the things that matter. In a town of a few hundred, everyone knows who you are. They know your name, your house, your footsteps, and most importantly, your shadow. They whisper it. That's him. They murmur it as you pass. Executioner. They pull their children close, as if you might accidentally decapitate someone in passing. And yet, despite the widespread recognition, no one really knows you. You could have a favorite song, a childhood memory, or a surprisingly good hand at wood carving. But none of that matters. Your identity has been reduced to a single thing, the blade. People don't see you. They see what you do. You're a living job description. Even when you're off duty, just walking to buy onions, people cross the street like you're contagious. No one asks how you're doing. No one asks if the job weighs on you, because they've already decided you don't feel anything. To them, you're not a man with doubts or regrets. You're the axe with legs. It's a strange duality. You're known by everyone, but fully understood by no one. You're present in every courtroom sentence, every hushed bedtime story, every moral lesson whispered to misbehaving kids, but never really invited into the world you serve. When you walk into the tavern, voices quiet. When you leave, they rise again. You hear laughter, but never with you, always after you've gone. There's no, how was your day? No, are you holding up all right? No, do you ever wish it was different? If you speak too much, you're unsettling. If you say nothing, you're cold. If you smile, it's the worst. It's creepy. The man who swings the sword shouldn't smile, ever. And so, over time, you play the part. You become the figure they already believe you are. Grim, silent, carved from stone. You learn to stand still, to nod, to fade into the background. Because while everyone in town knows your name, not a single one of them knows you. You're a myth made flesh, a necessary ghost, always functional, but completely alien in every other way. After a long day of dismemberment, blood-stained boots, and the polite trauma of a public execution, you finally return to your modest hut outside the walls, where silence is your only company and the faint scent of iron lingers in the air. You shed your cloak, set down your axe, and sit on the edge of your straw mattress, trying to reclaim some semblance of humanity. But the nightmares are already waiting for you. You close your eyes, and there they are, the faces, not heroic, not villainous, just people. Some screamed, some cried, some muttered prayers, their lips trembling. Some looked you straight in the eye, as if to say, you know this is wrong. But the worst, the ones who said nothing, the calm ones, the resigned ones, the ones who accepted their fate faster than you ever could. You replay every swing, feel every bone crunch, hear the crowd's gasps, their disgust, their delight. You see the bodies falling in slow motion, like tragic marionettes with their strings severed. There's no escape, not in sleep, not in silence, not in drink. You've tried them all. You flinch at everyday sounds. The clatter of firewood, the snap of rope, the creak of wooden stairs, reminders, echoes. You never forget the ones you botched, the blade that hesitated, the cut that went crooked, the moan of someone who should have died faster. You carry that with you. There's no one to check on you, no medieval counselor for post-traumatic decapitation disorder. You don't write letters. You don't cry in public. You stare into the fire, hoping your soul won't go numb before your hands do. Sometimes, in the dead of night, you ask yourself, what if they were innocent? What if justice was wrong? What if I was wrong? But you already know the answer doesn't matter. The sentence was passed. The crowd gathered. The axe fell. And the nightmare stayed. You were trained to kill, not to grieve. But your dreams didn't get the memo. So you wake up with clenched fists, aching temples, and blood that won't wash away because it's no longer on your hands. It's inside your head. The thing no one tells you when you become an executioner is this. You don't retire. There's no farewell feast, no pension, no golden axe mounted on a plaque. One day, your hands start shaking. You miss a swing. You dream too loudly. And the town starts to whisper, not with sympathy, with concern. Not for you, but for efficiency. To them, you're not a man. You're a cog in the justice machine. As long as the blade stays sharp and the swing remains steady, they nod from a distance and pretend you don't exist. But the moment you falter, the instant your hands tremble on the block, or you hesitate a second too long with the rope, the machine starts to break down. And suddenly, you're a problem, a liability, not because your soul is unraveling, but because you're disturbing the spectacle. The crowd didn't come to see guilt. They came to see competence. So the town starts to shift quietly. Maybe a younger man, your apprentice, your son, or some distant cousin, starts handling the smaller jobs. A flogging here, a branding there, maybe a hanging. No one tells you that you've been replaced. You just start getting fewer summons. The coin slows. The stares change from fear to faint pity, the most dangerous kind of pity, because it means they've stopped needing you. When you're finally forgotten, it's not by accident, it's by design. You fade back into your cottage outside the walls. Your tools rust beside you. Your hands, once steady and precise, now tremble when you lift a spoon. Your knees ache from a lifetime of kneeling at the block. No one comes to visit. Your name becomes a footnote in the village memory. Remember old, what's his name? The one with the axe? Oh yeah, didn't he go mad? And when you die, probably alone, the church can't even decide if it should bury you inside the gate or just leave you under a tree. Because in the end, you were never really part of the town. You were a service, and services, when worn out, are quietly discarded. At first, the job made sense. The condemned were thieves, murderers, heretics. You were the arm of the law, the edge of justice. You didn't question it. You executed efficiently, publicly, without hesitation. But as the years dragged on, and the block grew slick with repetition, something began to itch beneath the surface of your certainty. It starts small. A man sentenced for stealing a loaf of bread. He had 5 children, no defense, just hunger. Then, a woman accused of witchcraft simply because she muttered prayers in the wrong language. You could see the fear in her eyes, the confusion as the noose tightened around her neck. And then, the nobles, the ones who ordered deaths not because of guilt, but because of politics, land disputes, jealousy, or the need to silence someone. You start to realize something crucial. You're not just burying criminals, you're burying secrets. The executioner's block becomes a filter, one that sifts out the inconvenient, the poor, the powerless. And you're the final stamp, the one who makes it all irreversible. You want to believe in the law, in structure, in right and wrong, but the voices that once declared guilt with such confidence now sound hollow. You've heard the crowd cheer as a man screamed. You've seen magistrates exchange knowing glances like merchants haggling over a soul. You were always told it's not your place to judge. You only carry out the sentence. But what happens when the sentence is wrong? There's no room to ask, no confessional booth, no forum. You sit alone at night, sharpening your blade, wondering how many lives were taken because someone had a message to send, and you can't speak out. Not just because it's dangerous, but because who would listen? You're the executioner. No one believes the man who wears the hood. You don't get to offer opinions. You get orders. So, you bury justice one stroke at a time, not because you want to, but because you have to. Because in this world, truth is a luxury. You're just the broom that sweeps it under the scaffold. And the worst part? You're starting to think you were never justice's sword. You were its gravedigger. You spent your life in service, not to glory, not to gold, not even to justice, but to duty, the grim, blood-soaked kind no one talks about at feasts. And when your end finally comes, it isn't dramatic. No poetic final words. No family gathered at your bedside. Just a cough that won't go away. A slow fade in a straw-filled bed that still smells faintly of iron and damp rope. One last breath, and that's it. No bells toll. No priest rushes to your side. No one weeps. Your body is discovered by a local boy, or maybe not found at all until the smell becomes an issue. The town clerk marks your passing with a single sentence scribbled on the back of a tax ledger. Executioner deceased. Replacement pending. There's no funeral procession. No carved headstone. Maybe a wooden marker if someone remembers. But it won't last through the winter. You're not buried in the churchyard, of course. You're laid to rest outside the gates. The same gates you were never allowed to pass through in life. Executioners were, after all, unclean, tainted, useful, disposable. You were the one who buried hundreds, and yet no one truly buries you. The town moves on quickly. There's always another blade, another son, another poor soul who inherits the job like a curse wrapped in tradition. In the years to come, people might speak of you in fragments. The one who beheaded that baron. Remember, the one who drank alone and never looked anyone in the eye. Or worse, what was his name again? Your legacy isn't stories. It's not children or peace. It's silence. It's absence. It's the space you filled that no one wants to talk about. And maybe that's fitting. You spent your life ensuring the guilty were forgotten. You just didn't realize you'd be forgotten with them. So in the end, your death mirrors your life. Necessary, but never mourned, because in medieval society, you were never meant to be remembered. You were meant to be endured. And now, finally, you're not. It all started with water running through a ditch. On January 24th, 1848, a man named James W. Marshall, working on the American River near Coloma, California, looked down and saw something strange glinting in the sunlight. At first, he didn't believe it. It was just a tiny yellow flake. Could have been fool's gold. But no, it passed the scratch test. It was real, actual gold. Marshall ran to tell his boss, John Sutter, who was less than thrilled. Sutter wasn't thinking about riches. He was thinking about land. He was building an agricultural empire, and he knew what a gold discovery meant. Chaos, stampedes of strangers, squatter claims, the end of his carefully laid plans. So, the two men tried to keep it quiet. Spoiler, they failed miserably. Within weeks, the rumors spread like wildfire. Literally faster than the mail system could deliver, locals showed up with pans and pickaxes. People abandoned jobs mid-shift. Sailors jumped ship in San Francisco and vanished into the hills. Newspapers didn't even bother fact-checking. Gold found in California was printed like gospel, and then all hell broke loose. That summer, President Polk confirmed the discovery in a speech to Congress. That was it. The genie was out of the bottle. By 1849, over 90,000 people, nicknamed the 49ers, were pouring into California by land, sea, and every miserable in-between route imaginable. What started as one man squinting into a ditch became the largest mass migration in U.S. history. But here's the catch. Marshall never got rich. Neither did Sutter. The discoverers ended up broke, bitter, and pushed aside as the gold fever they unleashed consumed everything. Picture it. One accidental flicker in a muddy trench leads to a global stampede that reshapes the map, fuels American expansion, and catapults California from sleepy frontier to statehood in just 2 years. And the irony? The men who found the gold barely got a nugget. Now let's dive deeper into the madness, the migration, and the myths that turned California into the land of golden dreams and broken promises. Imagine you're a farmer in Ohio or a shopkeeper in Boston in 1849. You hear the whispers. You see the headlines. Gold, mountains of it, just lying there for the taking in California. You sell your land, kiss your family goodbye, and start walking across the country. That's what thousands did. And just like that, the age of the 49ers had begun. And then there was the disease. With thousands crammed into filthy, overcrowded camps, cholera and dysentery became grim companions. If you didn't succumb to tainted water, you might fall victim to a poorly cooked squirrel or a simple cut that turned deadly from infection. Real doctors were a rare breed, mostly medicine men armed with more moonshine than medical knowledge. And to top it off, the prices were absurd. A shovel that cost $2 in New York could set you back $30. In the mines, eggs were more a luxury than a meal. Laundry? You'd be lucky if you didn't just wear dirt. And if you struck it rich, good luck holding on to it. Theft was rampant. 1 minute, you had a pouch of gold dust, and by morning it was gone. So was your bunkmate. Yet somehow, The myth of fortune endured. People kept coming. The hope, the gamble, the raw possibility. It was enough. Where gold went, people followed. And where people went, chaos was never far behind. The gold rush didn't just create mining camps. It gave birth to entire towns in the blink of an eye. Places like Placerville, Marysville, and Deadwood, yes, that Deadwood, exploded in population faster than anyone could manage. These were the boom towns, and the name was apt. They boomed into existence, only to collapse just as quickly. Places without laws, without true government, and without any moral compass to guide them. Judges were rare, sheriffs even rarer. And gold? It made men desperate. If you didn't stake your claim quickly, someone might steal it. And even if you did, someone could try to take it by force, or simply shoot you and take it. Enter the vigilantes. In towns where the law hadn't arrived or had been bought off, citizens took justice into their own hands. Vigilante groups sprung up, some driven by noble intentions, others fueled purely by greed. Trials were swift, sentences even swifter. If someone was caught stealing gold or cheating at cards, they might find themselves strung up from the nearest tree without so much as a trial. It wasn't justice, it was convenience. The saloons became the pulse of these towns. Gambling, drinking, brawling, and the occasional stray gunshot made up the soundtrack of daily life. If you were seeking companionship, the soiled doves, women who had followed the rush westward, ran the bordellos, charging premium prices for their services while fighting to survive in a world that tipped the scales heavily against them. Yet, not everything was lawless. Many tried to build actual communities. Churches were erected. Schools opened their doors. Newspapers circulated their first editions. San Francisco even formed a committee of vigilance to root out corruption, eventually growing more powerful than the actual government. One strange detail: gold wasn't always used for buying things. It was far too easy to shave off. So instead, people traded in gold dust, literally measured by tiny brass scales on the bar counter. A pinch might get you a meal. A full pouch? Well, that might buy you a night you wouldn't remember. Boom towns, however, weren't built to last. Once the gold dried up, so did the population. Many towns were abandoned, becoming ghost towns almost overnight. While prospectors chased the dreams of wealth, others paid a price much higher than gold. The California gold rush wasn't just a tale of fortune, it was a story of displacement, violence, and racial injustice. The first to suffer were the Native American tribes. California's indigenous peoples had lived on the land for thousands of years, but once the rush began, they were driven from their homes with brutal efficiency. Forests were cut down, rivers poisoned by mercury and sediment, hunting grounds overtaken by miners and encroaching boomtowns. Some tribes were forced into servitude under the guise of apprenticeships. Others were massacred. State-funded militia campaigns were even dispatched to clear out native populations. It was nothing short of a catastrophe. In just 2 decades, California's native population plummeted by nearly 90%. Then came the waves of immigrants, particularly from China. By the early 1850s, tens of thousands of Chinese laborers had arrived, many hoping to work, make money, and send it home to their families. Instead, they found suspicion, racism, and harsh taxes. In 1850, California passed a foreign miners tax directly targeting the Chinese. They were prohibited from owning land, from testifying against white men in court, and from mining without paying extortion level fees. But despite these roadblocks, many Chinese miners endured. They created tight knit communities, took over abandoned claims, and helped lay the infrastructure for what would become the Transcontinental Railroad. Not long after, Mexican and Latin American miners were also pushed out, often with violence. Despite having legitimate claims and mining experience, they were driven out, labeled greasers, and stripped of their rights. African Americans, both free and enslaved, also ventured west seeking opportunity. Some did find it, establishing businesses, farms, and even newspapers. Yet, the racial lines were constantly shifting, and the promise of freedom came with few guarantees. Slavery wasn't legal in California, but loopholes were exploited by Southern slaveholders who brought enslaved people with them under false pretenses. The gold rush transformed America, but it also revealed the nation's deepest contradictions. It was a land of opportunity, yes, but only for some. Gold didn't just glitter, it oiled the wheels of a transforming nation. The California gold rush sent a seismic shock through the U.S. economy. By 1852, gold exports from California totaled over 80 million billions in today's dollars. That kind of influx didn't just fill pockets, it filled banks, backed currencies, and fueled entire industries. Suddenly, California wasn't a sleepy western frontier. It had become the epicenter of national wealth, ambition, and attention. But there was a problem. California wasn't even a state. It wasn't officially organized territory either. It had been acquired in 1848 after the Mexican-American War, but governance was a mess. The sudden flood of settlers made it clear that something needed to be done, and fast. So, in 1850, just 2 years after the first gold nugget was found, California became the 31st state. This was warp speed for U.S. expansion, and unlike other Western territories, it bypassed the awkward adolescent phase of territorial governance and jumped straight to statehood, no waiting in line. However, there was a catch. California was admitted as a free state, banning slavery. This threw the already fragile balance between free and slave states into chaos. The South was furious, the North was energized, and this political tension pushed the nation closer to civil war. Meanwhile, back in California, the wealth kept flowing, but not just from gold. Entrepreneurs saw an opportunity in the miners themselves. A German immigrant named Levi Strauss began selling durable canvas pants that miners couldn't tear through, effectively inventing blue jeans. Leland Stanford, who sold supplies to miners, later helped build the Transcontinental Railroad and founded Stanford University. That railroad, by the way, became the vital link connecting California's gold to Eastern markets. Before the railroads, it could take months to reach California by land or sea. With the trains, it only took days. The gold rush didn't just spark economic growth, it sparked infrastructure, commerce, and an unprecedented boom in Western migration. And while California grew wealthier and more connected, the U.S. realized something else. Whoever controlled the West might control the future. If the gold rush turned men into legends, it also transformed landscapes into battlegrounds. The earliest mining efforts were relatively gentle: pans, shovels, maybe a rocker box along the riverbank. But as surface gold became scarce, miners resorted to more aggressive tactics. That's when things got ugly. By the mid 1850s, hydraulic mining arrived. Picture this: massive nozzles, called monitors, fired water with enough pressure to obliterate entire hillsides. Mountains were pulverized into a muddy slurry in the search for minute specks of gold. It was fast, efficient, and devastating. Trees flattened, hills vanished, and rivers turned brown for miles. The sediment from hydraulic mining clogged riverbeds and flooded farmlands. The once fertile Central Valley started drowning under tons of mining debris. The Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers flooded, not just from rainfall, but from the unnaturally displaced earth. Crops withered, towns submerged, fish populations plummeted. This wasn't mining, it was slow motion environmental warfare. Miners also used mercury to separate gold from sediment. It worked, but the mercury didn't disappear. It seeped into the soil, flowed downstream, and poisoned ecosystems. To this day, mercury from the gold rush era lingers in California's waterways nearly 2 centuries later. Eventually, the devastation became undeniable. In the 1880s, a group of Central Valley farmers sued a hydraulic mining company in a case that became a landmark: Woodruff versus North Bloomfield Gravel Mining Company. The farmers won, and in 1884, hydraulic mining was effectively banned, marking the first significant environmental ruling in U.S. history. But the damage had been done. California's landscape was irreversibly reshaped. Forests turned to barren, mudflats, hills hollowed out beyond recovery, rivers rerouted, and ecosystems upended. Yet, the gold rush also sparked the beginnings of America's environmental conscience. As people saw the toll, voices began rising, calling for balance, responsibility, and protection of the land. These seeds would grow, years later, into national parks and conservation movements. The gold rush built dreams, yes, but it also left scars. By the late 1850s, the richest veins of gold had been tapped. Boomtowns began to empty as pickaxes were traded for plows, pens, and printing presses. But the gold rush didn't fade. It evolved. What began as a chaotic scramble transformed into a cultural myth. The California Gold Rush etched itself into the American imagination as a story of adventure, freedom, and reinvention. Newspapers spun tales of lucky strikes and overnight millionaires, while dime novels turned grubby prospectors into rugged heroes of the West. Of course, the reality was far messier, but myths rarely need facts. The prospector became an icon: weathered hat, long beard, gold pan in hand. Never mind that most miners were broken, poor, or buried in shallow graves. The image endured. California became synonymous with opportunity. The American dream suddenly had a location. Even phrases we use today: striking it rich, panning for gold, and yes, even the mother lode, all echo the lingo of 1850s mining camps. And let's not forget Levi's jeans. born from the tough demands of miners, and eventually embraced worldwide. Cities like San Francisco leaned into the legend. What was once a lawless port rebranded itself as a gateway to success. Tourism pamphlets extolled gold country, and old mining towns began staging festivals, reenactments, and parades to celebrate a time that had nearly destroyed them. The gold rush also heavily influenced American cinema. Westerns romanticized the lone miner with a heart of gold, fending off claim jumpers and wooing saloon girls. It wasn't accurate, but it sold tickets and helped cement the frontier myth in popular culture. But beneath the polished myths lay harder truths: environmental destruction, racial exclusion, and lives lost in the pursuit of fleeting glitter. Still, the dream endured, and perhaps that was the point. Because the gold rush wasn't just about wealth, it was about hope. The belief that if you were brave, lucky, or stubborn enough, you could change your life with nothing more than a shovel and grit. The California Gold Rush officially ended in 1855, but its impact never truly stopped. California, once a remote Mexican frontier, had become a powerhouse. Within just a few years, it had gained statehood, reshaped the U.S. economy, and attracted people from every corner of the globe. But more than that, it had become a symbol of reinvention, ambition, and the promise that something might still be buried just beneath the surface. The population surge didn't just bring gold hunters, it brought builders, teachers, merchants, and dreamers. Former miners started farms, businesses, and newspapers. The infrastructure built for gold was repurposed for growth. Roads turned into trade routes. Camps evolved into cities. Shacks were replaced with homes. San Francisco went from a mud soaked outpost to a bustling metropolis practically overnight. And the gold rush didn't just leave physical scars, it left an emotional blueprint. That same gamble it all attitude would later fuel the rise of Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and counterculture movements. Whether it was celluloid, silicon, or psychedelics, the spirit was the same. Come west, try something wild, and maybe, just maybe, you'll strike gold. Even the late 20th and early 21st century tech boom echoes the spirit of 49. Young entrepreneurs, fueled by belief in caffeine, rushed into California armed with nothing but a laptop and a dream. It's not so different from the dusty miners with their pickaxes and high hopes. But the gold rush also serves as a reminder of what ambition can cost. Native communities were decimated, ecosystems were disrupted, inequality became baked into the economy from the very beginning. For every lucky strike, there were hundreds left behind, forgotten in the footnotes. Today, remnants of that era still dot the landscape: ghost towns, rusted mining equipment, and winding trails through the Sierra Nevada. Museums preserve the artifacts, schools teach the legends, tourism boards sell the fantasy, but the deeper legacy lies in the psyche. The gold rush gave America a permanent sense of urgency, the idea that something bigger, better, and richer is always out there. All you have to do is chase it. So when you hear the phrase California Dream, remember it started with a shimmer in the dirt and 1,000 men willing to risk everything for a shot at something more. The desert might appear as a barrier, yet, for ancient traders, it was a vital passage. Long before modern roads, camel caravans bridged sub Saharan Africa with North Africa, the Levant, and Arabia. These routes carried gold, salt, frankincense, myrrh, ivory, slaves, and stories. The camel, dubbed the ship of the desert, was key. Domesticated around 1000 BCE, the dromedary camel endured intense heat, could travel days without water, and carry up to 600 pounds. In North Africa, trans-Saharan trade routes thrived between kingdoms like Ghana, Mali, and later Songhai. These were not barren wastelands, but networks of oases, market towns, and fortified caravanserais where traders rested and exchanged goods beneath starlit skies. Gold from the Niger River basin traveled north, often traded one for one with salt, vital in tropical regions. Salt from the Sahara was cut into massive blocks and transported south, forming the backbone of empires. Meanwhile, in Arabia, the incense trade flourished. Frankincense and myrrh, harvested from southern Arabia, modern Yemen and Oman, were highly prized in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome for use in temples, medicine, and burials. Caravans crossed the Arabian desert along routes like the Incense Road, stopping in cities like Petra and Mecca long before Islam. These were not quick trips. Some caravans took months or even years to complete. Traders braved sandstorms, bandits, and dehydration, but the rewards were immense. Cities like Timbuktu, Gao, and Uba became wealthy and influential hubs of culture, wealth, and learning. The desert trade may have lacked monumental architecture, but its resilience made up for it. These routes connected continents. The fourth side, the open Caribbean Sea, stretches endlessly to the east. This combination of land and water made Tulum uniquely defensible and deeply symbolic. Some accounts suggest the city was originally named Zamar, meaning City of the Dawn, likely referencing its perfect alignment with the rising sun. From its cliffside perch, Maya watchmen could spot merchant canoes approaching from Cuba, Belize, and even Honduras. Tulum was a crucial link in an intricate maritime trade network, dealing in obsidian, jade, salt, honey, textiles, and dried fish. It connected inland cities like Koba and Chichen Itza to the sea, with wealth flowing through both canoes and caravans. But Tulum was more than just a trade hub. It was a spiritual citadel. Every building, platform, and shrine was carefully positioned, many aligned with celestial bodies or significant dates in the Maya calendar. Tulum wasn't just a city, it was a place that watched both the sky and the surf. Even after the Spanish arrived and Tulum was abandoned, the city remained visible from the sea, a haunting reminder to passing sailors of a civilization that charted the stars long before Europeans set sail. Though Tulum may seem small compared to towering Maya cities like Chichen Itza or Tikal, its compactness is deceiving. Every structure within its stone walls was purposefully placed, shaped by astronomy, spiritual belief, and strategic design. This wasn't just a city, it was a cosmic map carved in stone. At its core, Tulum's layout reflects a balance between the earthly and celestial realms. The city is protected on three sides by thick defensive walls, some as high as 5 meters, sending a clear message that Tulum was as focused on defense as it was on worship. Within these walls, temples, altars, and platforms align with the heavens. The centerpiece of Tulum is El Castillo, not a castle in the European sense, but a temple pyramid dominating the skyline. Perched on the edge of a cliff, it served as both a religious shrine and a lighthouse for Maya sailors. During certain times of the year, when the sun rises directly behind it, El Castillo's facade lights up in perfect symmetry. Some scholars believe it was used to track the solstices and equinoxes, aligning Maya rituals with cosmic rhythms. Adjacent to El Castillo stands the temple of the descending god, named for the figure above its doorway, an upside down deity with wings possibly representing a celestial or fertility god. This temple faces west, catching the sunset, symbolizing the transition from day to night, life to death, key themes in Maya spirituality. Many of Tulum's structures were built on raised platforms, oriented along precise axes, often northeast southwest or east west. These were not random choices. They reflect the Maya obsession with tracking Venus, the sun, and the lunar cycle. Even doorways and windows seem to frame celestial events at specific times of the year. Tulum's architects didn't just create a defensible city, they crafted a spiritual calendar in stone. It was a place where architecture, astronomy, and mythology fused seamlessly into everyday life, rising above the turquoise sea like a silent sentinel. El Castillo is Tulum's most iconic structure. Positioned at the edge of a limestone cliff, it commands not only the coastline, but the heavens themselves, a fusion of engineering, astronomy, and sacred symbolism. Though not as grand as the Great Pyramids of inland Maya cities, El Castillo wasn't designed to compete in size. It was meant to signal. Built in stages, El Castillo likely served multiple roles: a temple, shrine, watchtower, and possibly even a lighthouse. During the day, its high elevation and stark stone facade made it visible from far out at sea. For Maya, sailors navigating the Caribbean in large dugout canoes, El Castillo marked both a physical and spiritual harbor, a beacon of protection under the god's watch. At night, fires may have been lit within the temple at the top of the structure, paired with small windows and aligned with gaps in the coral reef. The glow could guide mariners safely to Tulum's shore. In this way, El Castillo may have been one of the earliest lighthouse-like structures in the Americas. Religiously, El Castillo was likely dedicated to the diving god or the descending god, figures associated with Venus, a planet central to Maya cosmology. The Maya believed Venus influenced warfare, agriculture, and the calendar. Structures like El Castillo helped track Venus's appearances in the sky during specific dates in both the solar and Venusian calendars. The sun would rise or set directly in line with the temple, bathing it in radiant light, a moment of cosmic synchronization. The temple itself is modest in size, but elevated for maximum visibility. Its stairways and niches suggest that rituals were held atop, where priests performed ceremonies visible from the plaza and coastline below. Unlike the massive ceremonial complexes inland, El Castillo wasn't about grandeur. It was about function, guiding ships, channeling solar energy, and connecting the sea with the sky. In the heart of Tulum's ceremonial core is one of its most fascinating buildings, the Ro'ai Temple of the Frescoes. Unlike the imposing height of El Castillo, this structure draws attention not for its size, but for its intricate detail. This multi-level temple complex is rich in symbolism and iconography, featuring some of the finest surviving Maya murals on the Yucatan coast. The temple served dual purposes as a shrine and an observatory. The upper level likely functioned as a ritual space for priests, while the lower chamber housed painted murals and stone carvings that brought the Maya cosmos to life. Though weather and time have eroded many of the original pigments, enough remains to provide a striking glimpse into Maya spiritual thought. The frescoes depict a pantheon of gods, deities, and supernatural creatures. The descending god, often shown upside down, is a prominent figure, a rare and intriguing presence in Maya art. This god is associated with Venus, fertility, and possibly bees. Important elements, the entrances were few and narrow, forcing any intruder to enter single file, vulnerable and exposed. Strategically positioned along the perimeter were watchtowers, squat, round buildings with small windows or slits that offered a clear view of both land and sea. From these towers, guards could spot approaching canoes long before they neared the shore. These towers may have also served as communication points, using smoke or fire signals to warn the city's elite of threats or arrivals. But these defenses were not solely practical, they also had a spiritual aspect. To the Maya, the walls of Tulum didn't just protect, it separated the sacred from the profane. Inside the walls was holy space, where temples aligned with the cosmos and rituals mirrored the stars. Every step taken within was observed by the gods. Outside, beyond the walls, lay the wilderness, an unpredictable, unstable world of politics and warfare. The positioning of Tulum also gave it immense control over both land and sea routes. It stood along the Maya coastal trade network, a vital artery for goods moving up and down the Yucatan Peninsula. Salt, honey, jade, obsidian, and cacao passed through its gates. Any merchant sailing the coast would have seen Tulum's cliffside silhouette long before reaching it, a constant reminder of its power and protection. In Tulum, strength and sanctity were intricately intertwined. Long before colonial ports and international harbors, Tulum was a bustling maritime trading post, linking inland Maya cities with the wider Caribbean world. Its location was chosen not just for its beauty, but for its strategic advantage. Perched above the sea, with access to sheltered landing beaches, Tulum was built to connect. The Maya were expert seafarers, crafting massive dugout canoes from saber trees, some large enough to carry 20-30 people and hundreds of pounds of cargo. These vessels paddled up and down the Yucatan coastline, reaching as far south as modern-day Honduras and north to the Gulf Coast. With prevailing currents and reliable trade winds, Maya merchants followed well-established maritime routes, making Tulum a key stop. Goods flowed in from all directions, from the inland highlands came obsidian, jade, and cacao, valuable items used in rituals and elite exchanges. Coastal merchants brought salt, dried fish, cotton textiles, honey, feathers, and shells. Tulum didn't produce all of these items itself. It was more of a distribution point where goods could be stored, taxed, and redirected along trade routes. What made Tulum unique was its combination of sea access and defensive structure. Unlike open coastal towns, Tulum had walls, not just for protection against raiders, but for controlling who came in and out. Goods were monitored, tribute was collected from merchants, and priests likely blessed transactions, reinforcing the notion that trade and ritual were deeply connected in Maya society. Foreign merchants may have passed through too. Ceramic styles and imported objects suggest contact with other Mesoamerican peoples, including those from central Mexico and the Gulf Coast. Tulum was no isolated city. It was plugged into a regional system alive with economic, cultural, and spiritual energy. Canoes likely pulled into small landing beaches just below the cliffs, where goods were offloaded and carried up into the city. From there, they could be exchanged, stored, or transported inland by human porters to major cities like Koba. Tulum was a crossroads of geography, culture, and identity. For centuries, it thrived as both a sacred stronghold and a bustling trade port, but, like all great cities, its dominance eventually faded. By the time the Spanish arrived in the early 16th century, Tulum was still standing, but it was already in decline. Its walls remained intact, its temples still visible from the sea, but its golden age had passed. The decline of Tulum was gradual, not catastrophic. There is no evidence of war or violent destruction, no signs of mass fires or invasions. Instead, it seems that the city slowly lost its strategic significance as trade networks shifted and larger inland centers like Chichen Itza and Mayapan rose and fell. Tulum's influence began to wane. The economic arteries that once flowed through its gates may have redirected elsewhere. Broader shifts in Maya civilization also played a role. By the late post-classic period, many Maya cities were experiencing political fragmentation, shifting alliances, and population decline. Environmental pressures, such as droughts and soil exhaustion, likely contributed to the instability throughout the Yucatan, and these factors would have affected Tulum, even though it was more coastal and less reliant on agriculture. Then the Spanish arrived. In 1518, Spanish explorer Juan de Grijalva sailed past Tulum. His crew marveled at the city's towering stone buildings and imposing walls. A few years later, during Hernán Cortés' expedition to Honduras, the Spanish again passed by Tulum, noting its beauty and the towering temple that loomed over the sea. However, they did not stop to conquer it, not at first. By the end of the 16th century, Tulum was abandoned, whether due to disease, disruption of trade, or the cultural upheaval brought by colonization and Christianity. Its people gradually left. What remained were empty temples, wind-worn walls, and the echo of rituals once performed beneath the stars. Yet Tulum never truly disappeared. Unlike many jungle-covered Maya ruins, Tulum stood exposed, visible from the sea, a ghost city perched on the cliffs. Sailors passed by for centuries, its silhouette serving as a marker of a world slipping into memory. Long after the last incense burned and the final traders departed, Tulum stood silently above the sea, not lost, but waiting. Unlike cities like Palenque or Calakmul, which were swallowed by the jungle, Tulum's cliffside location kept it visible to sailors and locals alike. But it wasn't until the 19th century that Tulum re entered the global historical imagination. In 1842, explorers John Lloyd Stevens and Frederick Catherwood arrived at Tulum during their famous journey through the Maya world. Stevens, an American diplomat, and Catherwood, a British artist, were among the first Europeans to document the ruins in detail. Catherwood's illustrations of El Castillo and the Temple of the Descending God mesmerized European readers, and Tulum quickly gained fame as one of the most photogenic and accessible Maya sites. Archaeological work increased. In the 20th century, the Mexican government initiated preservation efforts, stabilizing structures and clearing away the vegetation that had grown over centuries. Unlike more remote jungle ruins, Tulum was relatively easy to access and became a popular destination for historians, tourists, photographers, and spiritual seekers alike. Today, Tulum is one of the most visited archaeological sites in Mexico. Thousands walk through its stone gates each day, passing temples that once aligned with the stars and walls that once defended sacred ground. Visitors stand where Maya priests once charted Venus in the sky and where sailors first saw the city rise from the waves. Yet the true magic of Tulum lies in its continuing revelations. New studies using LiDAR scanning and satellite mapping are uncovering more about the site's original layout and its connections to inland cities like Koba. Scholars are still debating the true identity of the descending god, the precise function of El Castillo, and the exact reasons for the city's fall. But beyond the questions, Tulum remains a symbol of Maya resilience, architectural brilliance, and cosmic curiosity. It reminds us that ancient peoples weren't isolated. They navigated oceans, tracked stars, built observatories, and structured their cities around cycles larger than themselves. Tulum isn't just ruins on a cliff, it's a living testament to a civilization that saw the universe as something to align with, not conquer, and that vision still echoes every time the rising sun spills across the stone.